So as I hinted in the Penguin video, I have seen the show, and I was doing my best to be a good boy because of the NDA. I think I did a pretty good job tiptoeing around some stuff and being vague, but that being said, I would probably give the Cape Crusader a 7 out of 10. The show is going to be very divisive, unlike some of the other Batman shows we had. Now, don't get me wrong, the 2004 Batman show did have its share of people that didn't like it. And that was mostly due to the fact that everyone and their mom was a martial artist. And the 2008 Batman Brave and the Bold also had its share of people that didn't like it because they weren't accustomed to the campy Batman making a comeback. And both Batman fans did settle in, and the show got better over time. Both of them did, and then, I was sad to see both of them end, eventually. But in the beginning, yeah, I didn't really like them. It wasn't Batman the Animated Series, it wasn't Justice League. And, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini basically kicked open the door and changed things forever. To the point where it's very hard to have a new Batman show come out that, is going to replace that. And nothing ever will, because that show not only is timeless, but it's perfect. And the Cape Crusader misses that mark. The Cape Crusader tries too hard to basically play tug-of-war with the audience. There are elements of the show that's modern audiences that will drive you crazy, especially if you're a sane person. And then, as a sane person, there are parts of the story that just, the pacing is just all wrong. And you want them to focus on a key character, who the show is named after, instead of some other characters. And, it just doesn't work. So, moments of greatness, and then moments of just cringe, I guess you could say. The action sequences are very cool. And Batman does show up in the show. He's just not there as much as a lot of people would want. So maybe for a second season, they'll be able to rectify that. Batman, when I first heard him in the show, it gave me tingles. In a good way. Like, it kind of set, ripples down my spine. Like, wow, this Hamish Linklater guy is actually a pretty good Batman. And if this works out really well for him, I would love to hear him as a video game Batman or another Elseworlds Batman. I think that he would do a great job. Bruce Timm basically told Hamish, hey, when you do this, I want you to relax, and Batman is who he is, and Bruce Wayne is the mask. He is the performance. Just like how Kevin Conroy used to do things. So, while this man is not necessarily filling Kevin's shoes, R.I.P. Kevin Conroy, he definitely brings his A-game to the show. I don't think anyone will have a problem with Hamish's Batman. If anything, I think it's really going to pull a lot of fans together. So yes, I've gotten a lot of questions about that. Is he a good sounding Batman? Yes, he is. His Batman and Bruce Wayne are both distinct. Sometimes you can kind of feel like similarities to Batman and Bruce Wayne from the animated series, but again, that's because they're playing it up very similar to how the animated series went. The animated series, Bruce Wayne was the over-the-top character that was trying to get suspicion away from his darker persona. So, more or less, the same, tread is on this Cape Crusader show. Now, I kind of want to focus on Bruce Wayne just a little bit, because he is a very, we'll say, hilarious character. Bruce is a very larger-than-life character in the Cape Crusader. Once again, he has to use the Playboy persona and do crazy things to get suspicion away from people thinking, that guy's Batman. Now, Batman has not been around very long. I wouldn't say that this is like a year one situation as opposed to maybe like year and few months. Very, very raw, brutal Batman. And at the same time, we also get to see kind of like a bipolarness between Batman and Bruce Wayne. There's a different psychology involved with it. For one, when Bruce is out in public, he acts a certain way. He's very kind, very warm, very gentle. And then you see the mask come off when he's with Alfred, and he's very cruel, vindictive, cold. And I would say a very similar performance to this type of Bruce Wayne, which is not the warm, gentle, compassionate, caring, loving Batman that we had with Kevin Conroy, where you could see elements of that in the animated series when he would interact with Leslie Tompkins, where he would hang out with Robin or Alfred or Commissioner Gordon or any of his friends as Bruce Wayne, and also show leniency and like a human heart to the villains that he beats up. Like, he wouldn't actually go out of his way to try to kill or hurt somebody. He did, break bones, and he did, make criminals fear him, but he never tried to kill anyone. In this show, you can't say the same thing. Batman's mission is the most important priority for him. So people get hurt or tail whipped with the Batmobile, or bones get broken, dropped off things, punched too hard. He doesn't care about what happens to his fellow man. If they're still breathing, it's good enough. So it has echoes of Ben Affleck's Batman, which, you know me, I love that, and we'll talk about that later, but Bruce Wayne, again, when the mask comes off and there's no one around but Alfred, he is very, very similar to the Batman that we met in the Justice League New Frontier movie. If anybody remembers that film, fantastic movie, but you could argue Batman was very cold and very distant. This Batman, also very cold, very distant, just wants to do his Batman stuff and doesn't really care about the Bruce Wayne aspect. The Bruce part of his life is just a facade. It doesn't matter, he hates doing it, he hates the people around him, and the only time that he ever shows an interest in anyone really is Selina Kyle. The chemistry between these characters, just like, it's electric, you know? It always is. I know that's something that they've always done, but I would say that they have a similarity to each other like the animated series, but the animated series capitalized on that chemistry way more, and Catwoman was utilized quite a bit. And my hope is the same, that Bruce and Selina will have more moments going into the second season. But Bruce Wayne is a jerk. It's not like you don't like him. I think that he's trying to make you not like him, because the mission is all that matters. Very reminiscent to the final, well, not really final episode, but one key episode in the Batman, where Nightwing and Oracle are around and Batman's fighting Mr. Freeze and all he cares about is the mission. He's very stoic like that, you know? So if anything comes between his brooding time and his Bruce Wayne time, he would much rather be Batman than Bruce Wayne. Now, maybe as the show goes on, we'll get to see like kind of a more healthy mingle between the two personas, and maybe even a fusion of it, kind of like what Matt Reeves did with the Batman, because, of course, you know, Matt Reeves worked on the show. But again, it harkens back to what's already been done, and I feel like Kevin Conroy's Bruce Wayne was a lot more friendlier than the Bruce Wayne that we have as the performance piece. But that's just my 2 cents on that. Batman's gadgets are very, very bare bones, and would make sense for the 1940s noir setting. Too bad that, you know, they incorporate a lot of 2020s nonsense sometimes, so, you know, again, it breaks that, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm immersed in this, and then, snap. But the gadgets really ground Batman in the 40s. Everything that he uses makes sense for what's going on with the plot. When Batman needs to break into places, he has to use a lockpick set. So he literally has to crouch down, and so he could see the keyhole, and he does, you know, the lockpick stuff. The last time I did lockpicking in a Batman game would be Batman Dark Tomorrow, and that's the only nice thing I can say about that. So it's similar to that, but the gadgets that Dark Tomorrow Batman used were definitely very modern. This is literally like hairpins and some other stuff that Bruce probably got from one of his one-night stands with some lady, you know? So that's what he uses. For his investigation stuff, whatever books or files that he can find, he has a very good memory, although he does find little scraps of paper that he can then take back to the Batcave and analyze through a very big microscope. His Batcave contains a lot of books and encyclopedias, as well as he has a map of the city, like a kind of magic board, but not really. It's a glass board. The glass board is very similar to the glass board of the map of Gotham that Adam West used in the 60s show. So that was kind of nice to see. Maybe that's a throwback to that. I don't know. But Batman uses that map to basically track all kinds of crimes and create a pattern, and that's how he runs into people. But for the most part, he just uses whatever he can. This is also a very, very brutal Batman. I kind of hinted at it a little bit that he doesn't really care about his fellow man, but also he doesn't like to waste a lot of time. So when he fights, he's kind of like Ben Affleck in that warehouse, except in animated form. He doesn't care about what he does, and he does not hold back his punches. You know, he's like, maybe I should not do this next time, but it's just kind of a passing thought, and he shrugs it off. Whether it's a police officer or it's a criminal, it doesn't matter. This is a brutal Batman, and I like that. I do. The fight scenes were very well choreographed for what they were, and, you know, I was cheering quite a bit when Batman was, like, literally, you know, smacking people around and stuff like that. Alfred is kind of likable for me, as Bruce Wayne really isn't. They are, of course, using the fat Alfred from the original Golden Age. If you didn't know this, Alfred was actually a more big bone character and then eventually was changed to a more thinner type and the more friendlier version of Alfred. This Alfred is very straight man, I guess you would say. You know, he puts up with a lot of stuff that Bruce Wayne slash Batman does in terms of how he talks to him. Very faithful butler. He helps Batman out on occasion. You see him a lot in the Batcave, and he's a very big asset to Batman. And I hope they do more with his character as, you know, other seasons progress, hopefully. I myself am not a huge fan of the Golden Age Batman. That was the Bob Kane, Bill Finger years. I have some Golden Age, I guess you would say, like hardcover completions that fans have given me over the years, as well as I believe WB and DC Comics gave me one like around the time of Arkham City. But I've never been a fan of the Golden Age Batman. My Batman that I prefer is the Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil Batman. So 70s, or as we call it, the Bronze Age of Batman comics. I really enjoyed that. And of course, the Bronze Age was what the animated series was based after. Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, all of them were big fans of the Bronze Age comics, which is why we got Ra's al Ghul and Man-Bat and some of the other more interesting characters that showed up instead of Batman's particular rogues. So the Caped Crusader also brings in characters that we haven't really seen before in, you know, current modern times for the cartoons. And for the most part, I think the episodic format works. You know, each villain is kind of like the flavor of the episode, 10 episodes in general. There were some standout episodes that I really liked, the Catwoman especially. I love seeing Catwoman's classic look again. It made sense for, you know, the 40s times too. Like, it's a purple dress with some boots and a cape, and you know, it's very theatrical, but also, you know, it works for her figure and stuff like that. And you know, I think that Catwoman is actually a character that actually works for this 40s aesthetic. Now, as I said before at the beginning of this video, the 1940s are not handled well in this. There is a lot of revisionist history going on, and for someone who's a stickler for that kind of stuff, it really bothers me, because it's like, just don't say that it takes place in the 1940s. Now, I know there's going to be some counter-arguments. People say, well, Batman the Animated Series took place in the 1940s. No, it did not. While it used the architecture of the 1950s, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and other people have come forward to say that the animated series takes place in its own set time period, where basically the 1950s carried over into the 90s, which is why you had computers, which why you had like more futuristic weapons and villains. And then, if you really pay attention to the show, by the time the new adventures of Batman and Superman with the Red Sky series, you'll notice that Gotham mysteriously becomes more 90s. They pretty much drop a lot of the 40s aspects to the show, except for some of the way the characters are dressed. Tim Drake is dressed very 1950s-like, with the white t-shirt and the blue jeans and stuff like that. And some of the thugs still are very reminiscent to that like 1940s, 50s style of clothing. But for the most part, the show has been kicked into the modern age, or the 90s, in order to reflect what's going on in Metropolis, because they didn't want the shows to be too different, you know, with the way they looked. So that's why they did that. But I always prefer the animated series the way it originated, where the 1950s continued on with its beautiful architecture into the 90s, and that's why a lot of their computers and televisions were in black and white and some other stuff. But Batman had all really cool gadgets with, you know, jet engines and things like that. But they could kind of play around in their sandbox. How they advertised this show, it was supposed to be a 1940s noir thing. And for the most part, it is. But when you incorporate elements from today, it basically completely shatters the immersion. So you'll be watching an episode, and you'll be eating your popcorn, and then all of a sudden there's going to be something, there'll be a word, or there'll be like some type of plot that's ripped right out of the 2020s, and like a snap of the finger, the immersion's gone. So for me, that's what happened quite a bit. That's why I said earlier there was kind of like a tug-of-war with the audience. It's like it can't decide what type of identity it wants. 1940s, you know, with a lens for Batman to have the story revolve around and for the viewer to be placed into, but also a lot of 2020 stuff. And not subtly done either, but that would be spoilers, so I can't really get into certain characters, because I'll talk about the villains in a separate video. Namely, Harley Quinn and some other stuff that, again, needs an entire video to discuss things. I mostly want to talk about Batman, and I think I kind of am, but I'm also kind of reviewing the show at the same time. Rest assured, the show does have beautiful orchestral music, and it works. It's not quite to the same caliber of the animated series, but I think the composer did a great job considering, and it keeps the spirit of the show from the 90s alive in a sense. But again, this is an Elseworld show. This is a whole different thing where there's gender-bent characters and 2020 stuff in the 1940s, as well as some other pretty cringy stuff, but I'm going to do my best not to get too much into that because then we'll, again, get into spoiler territory. Does anyone remember the Fisher Superman serials? How Superman would show up and he wouldn't really talk and he would fight the bad guys and the episode would end with something witty that Clark would say as he's stealing Lois's byline. We have a similar mechanic to that in the Cape Crusader. Batman shows up, throws some punches, and basically the episode ends. Whereas in the animated series, it felt like the entire show was, you know, catered around either Bruce Wayne or Batman. And the villains, you know, they were definitely the side characters of the episode, but they were written in such a way that they felt like they had, like, this bigger shadow cast over Batman. And it worked, you know, because sometimes the characters were larger than life because they couldn't make the show too intense because it was for Fox Kids. In this show, you know, everything is very, very dark and gritty. Even making Clayface a serial killer and stuff like his original roots, which is fine. But Batman, it almost feels like the problem that Michael Keaton had with later Batman movies. He didn't want Batman to become like a side character or not show up very much and have the villains overshadow him. It's not so much that the villains overshadow him, it's more like the Barbara Gordon show than it is the Batman show. And I know that's kind of a spoiler, but I'm kind of getting to that. It feels like, you know how He-Man showed up a little bit in the first season of his own show and Teela was the focus? It's kind of what the Cape Crusader is, although not so much, but it feels like it. It feels like they were really trying to give Barbara Gordon a lot more to do in the show than I think that people were ready for. And again, if you like that kind of stuff, cool, but this is supposed to be a Batman show, and Barbara is the focal point. It feels like everything kind of revolves around her, and Batman just is like this shadow that appears in Gotham and does stuff and terrifies people. And she's the White Knight of Gotham as the district attorney, or something like that. You know, she's around a lot. It's not that her character's insufferable, it's just like she feels very Mary Sue-like, I guess is the nicest way I can say it. The lady who's voicing her, she's fine. The voice cast is great. It's just, I wasn't expecting another Teela-like show. Does that make sense? That's a trope I kind of want to have die. Anyway, I think that you guys will like Batman's interrogation methods. It feels very kind of animated series-like, but much more grim. Like, he almost kills a couple people in his interrogation methods. But it works in the setting, you know. Gotham is scared of this guy, and, you know, so is, like, the citizens. So, you know, he's supposed to be this terrifying, imposing figure, and I think he pulls that off. A lot of people love how the show presents itself, and the cast, and the music, but it's like some of the storytelling and the pacing and some of the characters are insufferable. But, again, that would be spoiler territory, and I just want to talk about Batman. Batman is heavily modeled after his 1939, 1940s Bob Kane, Bill Finger counterpart. He uses pretty much everything that you could think of that would be available in the 1940s and the 50s. His car has a jet engine because, I mean, let's face it, it'd be pretty easy for him as a millionaire to get a hold of, like, military secrets and incorporate them into his vehicle. He has a crime lab, like we don't really have crime labs anymore to the extent that they did in the 40s and the 50s, but this is a big deal for Batman to have this because he's able to use his criminology stuff. There's typewriters, there is television, which was weird to see sometimes because this point in time, like, television was not very common. Again, if you're going with the 40s, you got to stick with the 40s. Otherwise, you know, just say that it takes place in kind of a 40s inspired world, but all the marketing has said 1940s Batman, but there's gadgets that both Batman and Catwoman have that are very sci-fi-like, so getting into the Silver Age territory, as well as armor and other things that the police use that was not available for police until the 50s and 60s. So, I mean, it takes different points in time and just places them in the 1940s, and it doesn't really work. Some of the haircuts are very like 1920s and the 40s, but also they throw in some 2020 stuff, which again is annoying because it completely snaps the immersion. Gotham by Gaslight, those movies did a great job of incorporating what Victorian Batman in the times would be like, and I was really hoping that the Caped Crusader was going to do that, so that was a letdown for me, you know. I really wanted to see like 1940s Batman and not the goofy, 40s serial. I wanted to see like a dark, gritty Batman forced to use the technology of the time and deal with the issues of the times and, work around that, but we didn't really get that. The detective elements that they use for the Caped Crusader is actually pretty awesome, and it works in the setting for where the show takes place. Batman investigates with very few tools, and also he pays very close attention to detail to corpses and other clues that he finds, like in the episodes, and I really did enjoy that. Whereas, we're so accustomed to the Arkham games where Batman uses like all this VR or AR technology and, he monologues and stuff like that, but here we have Batman using very, very little stuff, still brilliantly deducing, what's going on, as well as how he catches bad guys later on and stuff like that. So I really did like that, and you could tell that the writer of the show really knows what he's doing when it gets to the crime aspects and the mysteries and the thriller and stuff like that. It's just some of the other things for the show just completely don't work. Another thing that doesn't work is I was hoping for more of a relationship between Commissioner Gordon and Batman, and it feels like Barbara kind of steps in those shoes as well and is kind of like the go-between Batman and everyone else. So when I say you see Barbara a lot and it's kind of like the Barbara show, she's not necessarily Batman's sidekick, but she's in the show a lot more than I think she needed to be. I kind of liked how when they did in the animated series with like the DA people that were involved in the show, other than if they had a character-specific episode, kind of like, you remember that episode where Batman gets put on trial and the DA is a lady and she's the focal point of the story? Like, they should have had a Barbara Gordon-centered storyline with her being a DA and left it at that, but she shows up more often than she really should. And again, it becomes the Tila Batman show, or in this case, the Barbara Batman show, when, again, it hits all the right stuff. It does the detective stuff really well, the chases in the Batmobile, Batman beating up thugs, Batman doing stuff in the Batcave with his crime lab. All that stuff is great. It's just, there are elements of the show that just really pull it down. And again, my hopes for a second season is Batman interacting with more Batman characters and less the characters that Bruce Timm really wants us to have Batman be friendly with, especially Barbara, but I'll leave it at that for now. The action sequences that Batman's involved with are great. When he actually throws down and he takes on armed goons and stuff like that, you'll probably be cheering quite a bit. Very reminiscent to, Bruce Timm's style for combat. So if you're familiar with how they used to, get around censorship by showing like Batman fight with shadows and, being all mysterious and stuff like that, you're going to love aspects of the show like that. I've only seen the show all the way through once because I didn't have a lot of time. The only reason I was able to put this review together is because we were cyber attacked from the Penguin video, which we do have evidence of. And we are taking criminal action against the people responsible. So rest assured, justice will be served, because you cannot try to silence or destroy somebody's business or equipment because they said mean words to you on the internet. But anyway, where was I? Yeah, I like aspects of the Caped Crusader, but also, some aspects of it, it wasn't for me. But, that's just how it is. It would be great if this was a show that everybody could kind of, get behind, like the Batman the Animated Series or Justice League days. But the problem is, the writer is just going back and forth with his ideas, and obviously what was Bruce Timm and the studio's ideas, interjecting certain things into the show that did not belong in the 1940s at all. There was so much they could have done. But again, that would be spoiler territory, so we'll have to save that for another time. But I hope that maybe gets some of you excited for the show. If that sounds like something you're interested in, let me know in the comments section below. If you're going to pass on this show, it's a mixed bag, so I would say probably give it a chance. If you're already an Amazon person, Amazon Prime person, you might take away with more that you liked about the show than I did. Remember, I am a Very big lore person. So certain changes, whether it's gender swapping or other free liberties, sometimes I'm not really on board with. If they're handled well, then, um, that's one thing. But some of these things were just not handled very well at all. And it shows. It really does. It almost shows like this wasn't even the main intent for certain characters, but that's besides the point. Now I'm just getting into kind of speculation territory because I don't know. All I know is what pattern that DC follows, and this show does seem to echo a lot of the stunts that DC Comics pulls over the past 4 to 5 years now. It's very common practice of them to do that kind of stuff, which is sad, kind of lazy, but I mean, it is what it is. All right, people, thanks so much. I will be back with more stuff on Batman in the future, especially episode reviews, probably, and a big spoiler discussion around August 3rd or August 4th. I want to give you guys at least 3 or 4 days to watch the show before the hammer comes down, and I really get into the things that I didn't like, because it's very, very spoiler heavy. Okay, so thanks for watching, and take care, guys and gals.